This show is produced by the Harwood Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris, and we love making this show available to you free of charge. If you'd like to help us keep it that way, make a contribution to our Karma Jar or become a show sponsor. To learn more, visit our website. Today I'm baking a batch of these great little jam ribbon cookies. They're basically a shortbread that you shape into these logs and fill with any kind of jam you'd like. I'm going to first start by creaming my butter. So I've got 1 cup of butter out of the refrigerator. I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise twice and then into some little squares just like this. I find it helps it cream much easier. And then I'm going to put the butter into my mixer. Then I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And I'm going to let this cream until it's nice and light and fluffy for about 2 minutes. Then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of milk, and I'm just using a 1% milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Then at this point, I do want to take my spatula and scrape down the sides of the bowl. Then let that cream for about another 30 seconds. Now I'm going to turn my mixer off and I'm going to get my flour ready. So I'm going to lighten it up by stirring it with a knife. And then I'm going to measure out 2½ cups of flour and I'm going to put that into my mixing bowl. And the last ingredient is a ½ teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to let this mix just until the flour and the butter and sugar get incorporated. I don't want to overmix it. It's not supposed to be light and fluffy at this point. And then once it comes together, I turn off the mixer, and then I want to use my spatula to give it a scrape down, making sure there's no bits of flour at the bottom. Now I have a piece of plastic wrap on my cutting board, and then I'm going to take and put about 1/3 of the dough in the middle. And then I'm going to use my hands and I'm going to form this into a log. And then I'll fold the plastic wrap over and smooth that out. It ends up being about 1.5 or 2 inches in diameter and about 8 inches long. Then I'm going to take my 3 logs of dough and I'm going to put them on a plate and put them in the refrigerator for about an hour. They need to totally chill down. Now once the dough is chilled, we can go ahead and get it formed on our baking sheet. So I have a baking sheet with a piece of parchment on top. And I'm going to unwrap this and I'm going to place each log on my parchment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to start by pressing a well down the center of the dough. Now you can see here if you start to get a little crack, we'll just kind of push that together. Now I've preheated the oven to 375 degrees and these are going to first start baking for about 10 minutes. Now while our cookies are baking, you'll want to get some jam out. Now I'm using 3 different kinds of jam today. I've got an apricot, I have some plum, and then I have some of my raspberry freezer jam that I made. Now after 10 minutes, the cookies have started to bake, but they're not baked through. And you may also find that your wells are not quite as deep. So what I do is I just take a spoon and I kind of press that back down just a little bit, right in the center. Then I go ahead and I start filling some jam right down the middle. Now it's important we don't let it fill up too full. We don't want it to run over, but just a nice strip down the center looks great. Now I'm going to put these back in the oven for about 15 minutes until I see that the edges are nice and brown and the jam is bubbling. Now when we get them out of the oven, we want to immediately get them off onto our cooling rack. So I'm just going to slide the sheet. And you can see we have this nice browning right along the edges. Now these need to sit and cool for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes we can go ahead and slice the cookies. So I've slid the parchment onto a cutting board, and then I'm going to use one of my large chef's knives. And so I'm just going to take and I'm going to do kind of a roll. And that way I get these nice slices just like that. Now before you move on to slicing the other cookies, take a little paper towel and wipe that jam off, and then you can go through and slice the rest of them. So here they are, all nicely sliced up and ready to serve. Now if you want, you can either serve these as a slice, or if you want, you can take and cut them in half, and then you have more of a 2-bite cookie. If you'd like, right before you serve them, you can dust them with a little bit of powdered sugar. Well, if you'd like to try some of these jam ribbon cookies at home, just go to our website and go to the cookie jar show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. And as always, if you have any questions, please send me an email. I'll see you next time.